If the United States stands for anything, we believe in justice. Justice can be hard to define. Often you can recognize justice from its absence, from injustice. Fundamentally, we are a government of laws, not of people, as John Adams said. The way that I would put it is the right to be heard before being condemned to suffer grievous loss of any kind is a principle basic to our society. That's due process. Due process is the legal principle that says we're a government of laws. In other words, we'll submit ourselves to rulers only if we do so under rules. Due process legally means notice and an opportunity to see a judge. It also applies to immigrants. Under the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, immigrants are entitled to due process in deportation proceedings. In fact, with immigrants, federal law actually goes a step further. Immigrants have a right not to be deported to a place where they'll be tortured or killed. They have an explicit statutory protection for that. Now, the Supreme Court just handed down a ruling about whether the government can deport people to places other than where they're from, places where they have no connection to. Now, federal law requires the government to try those places first, but in this case, the government didn't. However, the court basically said, nah, the government can deport people to third countries, random third countries, without due process. Yes, this is insane. It's contradictory, and it flies in the face of what we all should understand as justice. So in these cases, the litigants are identified by their initials to protect privacy, and one of the people involved in this case is someone identified as OCG. So OCG is from Guatemala. He was tortured and persecuted there because he was gay, so he fled to Mexico. In Mexico, again, because he was gay, he was kidnapped and raped and held for ransom, which his sister paid so that he could be freed. He then fled to the United States and was caught up in this dragnet of deportation. So he begged not to be deported to Mexico because the last time he was there, he was kidnapped and raped because he was gay. The government said that they wanted to deport him to Guatemala, never mentioned Mexico to the judge. So the judge approved it, but the government sent him to Mexico. Luckily, the Mexican authorities stepped in to move him to Guatemala, where he went into hiding so that he wouldn't be persecuted in Mexico like he had been. He's been in hiding in Guatemala. Probably one of the worst parts of this to me is that the government is acting in bad faith here. The government is being shady. They're hiding the ball. They're outright lying. In OCG's case, there was an officer who interviewed OCG who said OCG told him he wasn't at all worried about going back to Mexico. So attorneys for OCG said that they wanted to put him under oath to have him answer that question under oath so that he would go to jail if he lied. The night before the deposition, the government handed over a document that said, oops, actually, the officer was mistaken. OCG did not tell the officer he wasn't worried about going back to Mexico. So recently, there was another one in May. Reports of plans to deport people to Libya, people who had never been to Libya. Like with El Salvador, this is just a random third world autocratic country that's going to help us disappear the people that we want to deport. So these were people from Laos, Vietnam, the Philippines, who have no connection to Libya whatsoever. There's a bigger problem from a humanitarian and moral perspective, though, which is that the locals heard about Libya taking American deportees and protested, took to the streets. There was such unrest as a result of this that there was violent action against armed groups in the capital, what reporters called the most serious street fighting since 2022 in the capital. There are basically two governments in Libya. Both of them are opposed, apparently violently, to taking Americans deported under this regime. These immigrants would have arrived there then if it weren't for the court stepping in. Attorneys for the immigrants raced to the court to try to get emergency assistance. The court stepped in and issued an order clarifying that the first order applied to these people that were going to be sent to Libya. and they weren't sent to Libya. Less than 2 weeks later, there was another report, this time plans to send people to South Sudan. At this hearing, the government said those people were already on the plane, in the air, en route to South Sudan. They said that the plane couldn't be turned around. They would not tell the court where the plane was. Also, they wouldn't confirm whether the government bothered to tell the pilots or staff that there was this court order that might affect them. In South Sudan, there is armed conflict between ethnic groups. Rocket attacks, violence are common. The State Department considers South Sudan too unsafe for anyone but their most critical personnel. They've issued travel advisories for citizens not to travel there. But this is the place that they wanted to send these migrants. The court said that in this instance, the government unquestionably violated its order. So why is this all okay? Well, the Supreme Court wouldn't say. They did this decision in an emergency docket, and so they didn't offer an explanation. But the government applied for this stay in May. This request has been pending for more than a month. So keep that in mind when you hear someone say that the reason the court didn't explain their reasoning is because it was an emergency and they had to move quickly. This is obviously shameful and embarrassing, especially that the United States is doing this. This is against everything that we're supposed to be for. I want to be clear that I'm not saying these people are innocent. I'm saying that these people have rights. They have rights to notice and an opportunity to see a judge. That's due process. Those are the same rights that protected Trump when he was accused of and charged with crimes. You have a right to be heard. You have a right to your day in court, which is what Trump got, which is what these people should get but didn't. And it's not like these people are on the street, okay? These people are in custody. They're in cells. So this isn't like we have to get them out because otherwise they'll go rob a 7-Eleven. Apparently, the Supreme Court is comfortable with letting the government disappear people to random violence-ravaged countries that they have no connection to and have never been to. I posted this because it's important to remember who we are. The government can do horrible things in our name. And you're not alone if you think the government's lying and shadiness here is un-American garbage. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think it's okay for the US to deport people to random countries that they have no connection to? I would like to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris with How to Politics.